Hello again. My name is Amy, also known as Ekami,
My name is Benji, also known as VT Lives.
and welcome back to our reading of The Name of the Wind. We are doing our second reading, and we'll be going through chapters 21 to 41, and we'll get right into it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'll be talking a bit about some summaries of some chapters, similar to what
so
Benji did
professional.
last time. So professional. You may see a page come up occasionally. So we'll start with chapter 21, which is called Basement Bread and Bucket. I made a note specifically before I got into the chapter summary that says just after the depressing end to chapter 20. So, as a brief reminder, we last left off with Kavoth, who found himself in the city of Tarbean, a massive city. Found that
Or
he
Tarbine
or
if you're cultured.
culture Tarbean. Oh God. And he found that he had to become a bit of a beggar and find his own way to survive in the city. He had broken his lute, and he was on hard times. So we pick up right there, and in chapter 21,
Oh
Kavoth
yeah,
spends.
he went to sleep in an alley, right?
Yes, on a box. Yeah, a crate.
Yeah.
Mm. Chapter 20 summary. Sad. Yes. Chapter 21 is called Basement, Bread, and Bucket. Cabal spends his first month in Tarbean, starving and stealing until he meets a man named Trappist, who is an older gentleman who helps to look after kids on the street. Cabal spends many months with him and a restrained child in the cot that he originally met Trappist in. Did we have any initial thoughts about that chapter?
Hush, hush.
Hush, hush, what?
What? I have some thoughts about it. I can go into it later though.
Mm,
Involving what I said last time about people being good, as opposed to like I thought that when he came across that farmer or the other way around, um, that it was refreshing that they were nice to him. But you were saying that it seems like everybody else has been pretty chill to him, and it seems as though although he perceives people throughout this as being awful, and a few of them are, the vast majority of them are just kind, helpful people. And most of the problems he has are related to him being unwilling to accept people's help.
that's interesting. I get that feeling a bit when we meet Trappist, and I think in part that is the influence of how Kavoth is seeing the world at the time. Because when we were first introduced to Trappist, I should say, I was like, oh no, I don't have good feelings. This is gonna be something that he's not gonna be a good person. I just have feelings. And that's how Kavoth was like feeling very like I don't want to trust anyone at this point, let alone this man, but he seems oddly kind, you know.
Are the majority of people helpful, or are the helpful people unusual enough that they get mentioned in the story? That might be the case.
Mm.
Although, well, okay, when he's in the city, there's a lot of he talks in retrospect or in passing about how awful it is, and then gives specific examples where the vast majority of people are perfectly fine. So I don't know if that's him uh, just brushing over people being shitty, or
Mm.
if that is an actual um, just the way he perceives it as a child. But I would say throughout most of the story, with the exception of a few people, everybody's been pretty chill or even helpful, if anything.
Mhm. I think we see that more as well as come across more of the chapters where he is in Tarbean longer and just spending the time.
So the interesting thing to me about um, what's his name, Trappist,
Mm.
is a theme throughout his time in the city that he never particularly explained. Of course, we find out a little bit more in chap I don't know the chapter when he talks to the bard.
We will see.
Um, uh, basically, he spends the entire time talking about how bad Telu priests are, though he never really explains why. Like, and
Hmm.
part of the reason he was afraid of Trappist at first because he thought he might be a priest, but then
Yeah, because
he's
of
like,
what he
oh no,
wore.
he might be a priest,
Hmm.
but then he wasn't. It's like, okay, but why? What's wrong with? I mean, in the context of the book, what's wrong with priests?
Hmm. And I mean, we also, I mean, this is something that I'll bring up as a because it's a later chapter, but Trappist tells a story and he only knows one story, he says. And
Hmm.
that relates to, well, to Telem kind of priests and the religious sect of Telu. Um, so that is interesting to note as well.
It's also I just kind of find it funny that he doesn't call them like Teluan priests or anything,
Yeah,
or he
Telem.
just calls them Telu priests,
Yeah.
which is like saying he's a Jesus priest,
Yeah.
or or like I don't know. It's just he's not naming them after the religion, but after the deity.
Yes. And Scarpy is also he says the same thing, but so does Trappist. Um
Yeah, it's a different meaning though.
yeah, a different way of saying it. We'll get into that too.
I think Trappist means it quite literally.
Yeah, he could not think of one. He was like, this.
This is the one I know.
And it's detailed and we're gonna talk about it. Whereas I
Do we
like
have to?
whoa, we'll get into that too. um okay. So maybe we'll get a bit into chapter 22.
Since we're talking about it so much.
Mm. So chapter 22 is called The Time for Demons. Kavoth has been in Tarbayan for a few months and understands waterside streets. Waterside streets are the poorer section of the city as opposed to Hillside, which is the wealthier portion. He visits Hillside towards the end of midwinter, specifically the midwinter pageantry, and is given a silver penny by a wealthy woman. A guard assaults assaults him and loses the penny, but is shown kindness by a boy dressed all in black with a demon mask of Encanas, as well as others around him. And these group of people gift him a silver talent. Kvoth eats well tonight, keeping to himself in Waterside.
I didn't think it was a boy. I thought it was a grown ass man.
Oh, I may have misinterpreted that then.
I interpreted him as some sort of leader figure.
Mm.
Like not like uh big leader figure, but like in there
Mm-hmm.
that little group, it felt like maybe he was the head of something.
Yeah.
Although maybe I was getting my wires crossed with the Telu
Mm.
mask guy.
Right. I think that I'm gonna pull up chapter 22. Uh, I don't think they ever name the leader, the one who gives him the talent. Like it's the group calling to him, being like, "We gotta go!" Like they're in a hurry. Um,
And Canis.
and Canis is the demon the mask that he wears.
Yeah, and that
Is that what they call him?
so yeah, and Canis is the main demon,
Yes.
right? There's
Yes.
one guy. So the way I interpreted this, he went over a little bit. So this festival is basically related to what we'll go into later with basically the equivalent of, or so there's Telu, who's like God, and then there is Encanis, who's kind of like the devil. Um, and Canis has a bunch of demons, and
Yes.
Telu has a bunch of
Followers?
followers.
Human followers? Yeah.
And so this festival is for like a week or something. They go around in the streets, and um, the Telu people try to stop the demon people, and the demon people try to cause mischief.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe there is one person wearing a Telu mask and one person wearing an Encanis mask.
Yes.
Which this is the guy wearing the Encanis mask.
Yes.
So I was wondering if this was a metaphor in a sense for the
Mm.
fact that maybe like he just really wants to hammer home how shitty the priests are. Where
Mm.
it's like the kindness is in the devil.
That's interesting. Yeah. Oh, they do name him
Yeah. They
Garrick.
don't name him. Oh, do they?
Mm-hmm.
Garrick?
Uh, yeah. Garrick is the one in the Incanus mask.
Right.
So I
Maybe I
that was my interpretation.
misunderstood the whole there's only one person wearing an Uncanus mask,
Mm.
but it seemed like that was, to me, that was the guy wearing the Uncanus mask. Obviously,
Probably.
they seem to have different celebrations in the two different sides of the city, but
Mm-hmm.
he's
Yeah,
described
he's
as a man.
yeah,
Okay.
so that might have been my interpretation of how they were speaking. Maybe I thought they were like teenagers. But that's interesting. I didn't even catch that. Hmm. But it was a very I mean, it was a very sad chapter. I mean, he got the shit kicked out of him.
That's a very chaotic festival. I mean, imagine if we had a festival which was everybody half of you go out for a week and cause trouble, just don't do any real trouble. Haha, we won't actually police that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's never gonna go wrong.
Mhm. And it's interesting about as well about how it is portrayed in waterside versus hillside. Um Kavoth like makes a note to like when he enters hillside just how different it feels.
Hmm.
Um
I pictured Hillside as basically like literally sitting up on a steep hill, and once you get up there it's like surrounded by buildings and there's like an alley with like herringbone uh bricks, and that's where the image I pictured, both when he went up there and got beat up and then when he went up there later as well.
mm.
I
Mhm.
don't know why that's important, but that's how I pictured it. And then like literally like 30-40 feet below uh, is
Mhm.
like the river,
Yeah.
whatever it's called, Riverside or whatever.
Waterside, which
Waterside, yeah.
I keep wanting to call it water slide. It's so bad.
I did not have that issue,
I don't
I gotta
know.
say.
Something about it. I was like, water side. Like I have to stop.
Kvoth describes how most places hire a troupe to play at making mischief, whereas in Tarbine, the
They're-
church opts for selling masks instead of hiring many troops.
Yeah,
That
because there's so
is
many
true, yeah.
people. Yeah.
So the festival itself might actually be okay, but it's just Tarbin is a bit shitty.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of church and church stories, chapter 23 goes into some lore with Telu. So chapter 23 is called The Burning Wheel. The chapter goes that Trappist tells the story of Telu and Encanas, and he tells it in a way that the children who he looks after ask him for a story, and he doesn't seem to think that he knows any particular story except this one. So he tells the story of these two, of the godlike figure Telu and the demon Encanas. There is a young woman named Perile who is a very pious woman, and she believes in Telu. Telu comes to speak to her in a dream and has a discussion with her around good people and maybe not so good people, and
So is
doesn't
her
really.
evil antithesis non-parile?
I mean, yeah.
Sorry,
That's
that
pretty good.
was
That's good. It's good.
that was my interjection.
It's
You may continue.
good. Proceed.
Proceed. You have permission.
um, and so after their discussion, she wakes up and the miracle of birth happens with her. She has a child named Menda, and we learn that Menda is a reincarnation of Telu in, I guess, purely human form. And Telu approaches, or a group of people approach Telu because they're interested about Menda. They hear that he's growing at rapid speeds, he's abnormal in a human sense, and he convinces them that he's Telu and convinces them to follow him by bonking them with a hammer.
We
And
should preface this with the beginning of that story, which is that basically the world is bathed in darkness and there's demons running amok. And
yes.
Telu basically is like, well, everybody's shit.
Yeah,
uh,
he's like,
I guess there's no redeeming them.
Telu lost faith in humanity at the very beginning of the chapter. And
And
Pariah
then
helps.
Perile's like, actually, they're fine. And he's like, oh, okay, fine. Well, I'll be your
All
child.
right. All
All
right.
right,
You've
man.
twisted my arm.
I'm coming down there.
um and so after this point, he has a large number of followers, and the story introduces Incarnus, who is the Lord of Demons, who is kind of the last standing demon who Telu wasn't able to, I guess, deal with. And so
Well,
they
he's
have
like the big
the
demon.
big bad. Yes.
Yeah.
The BBEG. Um and so towards the end of the chapter, after their uh, correspondences, I don't know. After they talk a bunch, they end up, or Telu ends up putting Incarnus on a great iron wheel, which burns his skin, and for a number of days he's stuck there. And then the end of the chapter concludes with Telu lifting up the iron wheel and tossing it into the pit, which smashes Incarnus, who dies immediately, well, over time. And Telu also kind of burns up and dies. And that is supposed to be the story of Telu and Incarnus. And that is most of the chapter.
What I wanted to say, other than that, um, is before we even get into the story, when I was reading about basically Trappist being asked to read this story, I kind of ended up thinking about what would happen if somebody asked me to tell a story. What would I tell?
Mm.
And that's I think that's a something we don't think about very often, and something that maybe we should think about more, because I don't know that I just have many stories on tap. I have
Yeah.
one or two like poems and stuff memorized.
Mm-hmm.
I have like jokes and things, but I don't have any like my kid comes up to me and says, "Daddy, tell me a story." I'm like,
I don't
once upon a time, Johnny went to the store and he
know.
bought some bread.
bought some milk because he was feeling fancy.
I could tell stories of what happened in my life, but I feel like that'll go to my head.
Mm.
I don't know. Do you have any stories on tap?
um, I mean, I would probably just immediately go to like the sagas that I've studied, but that's
Yeah,
because I've studied them.
yeah, but could you tell them? Do you
Not
think you could tell them?
well, because they are so extensive. There's so much detail in them. I could give a very brief synopsis, but not a story, you know? So it was, I will say it was interesting in terms of like that this was the chosen story that Trappist went with, because it reinforces that vision that Kavoth had, or idea, around Trappist wore these long gray kind of ashen robes, very similar to like a Telu priest. But he's clearly not really like involved with them now.
He's
Or
a
at least he
monk
doesn't.
vibe about him.
Yeah, very. I'm gonna look after these kids and be on my way, and that's his whole goal. Is he just wants to make sure they're okay. Um,
What?
what, hush, hush. I love him. And the actual story of Telu, I was like, okay, like I got the this is the Jesus kind of story, cool. I wasn't really as captured by it as other um stories of lore in later chapters. But I don't know.
So I also didn't care about the story. Like I kind of didn't care at the beginning. And then it went on for like 20 pages, and it should have gone on for a quarter of that, if that. But the problem is the fact that he spent so much time on it
Mm-hmm.
tells me that either it's really important later on, or
Mm-hmm.
he was really interested in that story, the author.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel a little bad saying.
Right. Yeah.
If it was like something that was like, oh yeah, I'm so excited about this. I love this bit of lore.
Yeah.
I'm like, that lore's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. I mean, I also kind of I also felt that it was long-ish, like it was a number of pages. But I also was equated, like when it would come out as a bit long, I was also envisioning Trappist telling it and maybe being a little rambly. Like he was telling it in detail and he was going into every single detail that he knew. Um so that's how I saw it. Not that that made my interest, any higher, but I felt like it was the way it was presented was interesting.
It goes from from page 172 to 183, so it's 11 pages.
Yeah. And it's kind of two arcs, right? Because we have the Menda stuff, and then we go into the fight with Encanas. So, but
Right, yeah.
it also gets a little bit into, like, I like that we have this basis, this story for Telu now, because then we get into later chapters where heresy is talked about, and like other versions where Telu is a character in a story, but maybe not presented in the same way as how Trappist presented him.
Hmm.
That was interesting to me. um but yeah.
Yeah.
Could probably go to chapter 24, which is just after Trappist tells that story. Chapter 24 is called Shadows Themselves. In this chapter, Kavoth witnesses a small boy get assaulted by a group of young adults. He considers helping the boy out, but decides against it to better keep his things. It's a very short chapter. Something more of like this is a little aside of a piece of the life that Kavoth experiences. I don't know if you had any thoughts there.
I think later he tells about how, I think it's the next chapter. He talks about how that affected him, which I guess we could talk about that
Mm-mm.
in that chapter. I feel like this chapter was more of a prelude to the next one, and the next one's the actual important part of it, whereas this is just a telling what we're going to talk about in the next chapter.
Well, the next chapter was the interlude. Interestingly, that
Yeah,
was
that's where they discussed what he had just said.
yes, yes. I was grabbing that. 20, one moment. 25. Yeah. Which is also a very short chapter, but yeah, so that one is chapter 25, which is the interlude, Eager for Reasons. So it is interestingly the only interlude in this section that where we come back to Bast, Kavoth, and Chronicler. Just kind of taking a moment and talking about that. And I didn't originally have any very much written down for this chapter, more or less because it was short and an interlude. Um, but he talks a lot about emotions in terms of like the life that he was experiencing at that point, I think, and how
Well,
he managed to survive.
he talks about how um basically in reference to the last chapter, he talks about how that him being um being unwilling to help others for the same thing that he was suffering from did more to affect his persona than the actual beatings and stuff that he was given,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
which I think was the more or less the point of the previous chapter, to show that he was suffering from more than just physical harm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gave him a lot to think about.
I, I mean, that was pretty much all that chapter was about, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I
like he
didn't
just said, and
write
then
very
went right
much.
back to it.
Yeah.
He had some mulled cider, which smelled great.
Oh, yeah.
Like I could smell, I could taste that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I love
Rothfuss
mulled
again
cider.
being very wonderful with his descriptions, so. Mm-hmm.
There's a poll. Everybody
Yes,
vote.
I saw that. How do you pronounce Tarbean or Tarbine? Tarbine. God, if someone said that to me, I would die inside.
Hey, you want a tar bean?
Hey, I love Name of the Wind. Oh, what's your favorite part? Oh man, the Tarbine part was real rough. The what? The what?
You know, the bit where he's stuck to a bean that's covered in tar.
Yeah.
Tar bean.
Oh, you don't remember that chapter?
Oh yeah, that was the secret hidden chapter.
Oh,
That was it was like the extra track on the album.
yeah. The B-side. And I did mention one thing in my note for chapter 25, and it was the mention of Scarpy, because he becomes a more important, well, a more focused character in the next chapter. It's like a transition.
Oh yeah, he says at the end, he's like,
Oh,
until I
Scarpy.
met, like I didn't care about anything until I met Scarpy,
Scarpy, yeah. The
the
bean
bean
side.
side.
Oh no. All right, let's see what these answers are.
That's the third that's the third sector of the city.
Yeah. Hillside, waterside, the bean side. I voted for two, but actually more Tarban.
Tarbean.
Tarban. Ban. Tarbian. That's an interesting pronunciation. Tarbian.
Man, you guys are wrong.
Clearly it's Tarbean. God.
Obviously, duh.
Duh. And speaking of Scarpy a story, chapter 26 is called Lonray Turned, and it is probably one of my favorite chapters, to be honest. I really liked this one. I wrote a lot about it. So, in this chapter, a rumor spreads of a man who knows every story, and if he doesn't know it, he will give the person who asks for the story one talent. That's the rumor.
Which is
Kavathram.
a currency.
Yes.
It's a coin. It's he's not going to bestow on them
I gift you
one ability
skills.
to do things.
Congrats. You can now write in cursive. Okay. So, yeah, so Lanray turned. Kavoth reminisces about, right, so before he meets Scarpy, he thinks back to a story of when he set a young boy named Pike on fire and burned all of his things. And this was
Yeah,
the
that
same
time
kid who broke his
he
lute.
fondly remembered that time that he lit a child on fire.
I don't know why I wrote reminisces, but that's what I wrote. And um, so after he uh, recounts this memory, he then goes to the tavern and sees Scarpy, who is telling a tale to a group of children, and finishes the story, but asks for an idea of what he wants to tell a story about, because he says he knows one story, but there's little pieces that are their own stories that come from this story. That was his whole thing.
I liked that.
Yeah, that was a good line. I actually wish I wrote that down, but it was a very nice line. And so then uh Gavoth then asks about the story of Lonray, he mentions. And so Scarpy tells this story. Um so he goes on to talk about how Lonray and Lyra are, well, actually no. before I go into that, he goes on to talk about um the city of um Tor, I believe. There was at the battle.
It was like Mere something.
Mir, yes,
Meerkat.
Mirkat, city of Mir. Let's go with that. Had the
Mere.
city of Mir and how it was kind of untouched by a large scale war that had been ravaging the other cities, and this city had um a battle happen in it, which was called the Battle of Tor, and at this battle, fought two
Mere
people.
Terranel.
Mir Sharon. Oh, okay. And at
I
this
just
battle,
flipped directly to that page. That was
oh,
actually crazy.
fair. That's fair. Nice. And so at this battle, we learn more about Lyra and Lanra, who are two very skillful individuals that are a power couple, more or less. Um,
Literally.
yeah. Lanra is very skilled in battle, and Lyra is very skilled with her words and kind of a magic vibe with her, is what I got.
She's good at naming.
Yes, which is a big thing in this book. I'm noticing more and more. Um, and so they fight alongside one another, and Lanre gets very he gets mortally wounded in this battle at Dressentor. Lyra,
More than that, he dies.
yes, he straight up dies,
Fully dies.
fully dies. Yes, Lyra then tries to call his name a number of times, and it is only on maybe the sixth time that she calls it that he comes back to life. Um, and so after a time, um, sort of time passes, and we are introduced to a man who dresses kind of all in black, and he approaches Celitos, who is this man who kind of looks after Mir Tareniel, and uh, we learn that so he basically learns that Lanre went into hiding and is able to find him, but Lanre comes back. He's dressed in black, very solemn, and Celitos has heard rumors that Lyra has died or something has happened to Lyra. He doesn't quite know. Um, Lanre's body language suggests that she is dead, and he's very upset and grief stricken. And so then it turns into a really interesting dialogue between the two of them, where Lanre reveals that he has been involved with destroying cities, like there's smoke billowing nearby. He specifically also puts us more or less a spell on Celitos to um not to freeze in place and to look ahead, and he can't do anything while armies come in and basically destroy Mir Tirania, which was actually really messed up. I was like, oh god. Um,
Celatos reminds me of Heimdall.
yeah, similar. Yeah, he has excellent eyesight, and that was his whole thing. He could see enemies coming from
I
like
feel like
miles and miles away.
it felt more than just good eyesight, but it
Oh,
felt like
yeah.
magical eyesight.
Yeah, yeah. I should say that was what I was joking about when I was reading it. I was like, he eats his carrots. um, but yes. So after Miratoriano is attacked and the spell wears off, he's able to talk more with Lanre, who tells more or less that Lyra's debt is past, and he is in such a grief-stricken state that he just doesn't see a point in a lot of things, and he's like his whole belief in everything is just shattered. Um, and so he himself says that I'm no longer Lanre at this point. I am Haliax or Haliax, which I was like, oh my god. Um, and so it ends by saying that Celitos curses the man named Haliax by speaking his long name, and he kind of fades out into shadows. Celitos comes back in later chapters. Well, soon after actually that, and that is more or less the story that Scarpy tells about Landre.
So I have two things. One, at what point did you realize that that was Haliax? Was it when he said it?
No, I had the feeling
Mm.
when he came
Suddenly
back and he
became
was,
evil.
yeah, like when he was like, "Oh, I'm
It's like, oh,
my
okay.
wife, my wife," he's like he's
My
very sad.
wife.
Like he was just very sad. I was like, "Oh, he's gonna be a Chandrian. Like he's gonna be the Haliax guy." Um,
So my other question
mhm.
related to that is, how does wife die?
I
They
don't
went
think
into
they,
so
yeah.
much detail about how Landre died the first time, but then
Mhm.
he just shows up and is like, "Oh yeah, my wife died."
Yeah.
I think he
They
killed her.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I wondered about like, like a catalyst. Like I mean, he suggests that the catalyst is my wife died, so I'm very
My
sad and evil.
wife.
But it'd be interesting if he killed Lyra, because then what kind of convinced him to do that? Is there something inside of him that is turning him into Haliax?
I interpreted that his becoming fell not as my wife died, I'm evil now,
Mm.
but as he shouldn't have been brought back from the dead. Like
Yes, I
that
agree.
was whatever they brought back from the dead was not
Was
him.
not Lanre. Yeah, or Lanre as they knew him.
Yeah. So basically, I think they brought the body back, but not the soul.
Yes. He's
So
very hollow. That's kind of how I would describe him. He's a very hollow character.
I think something along those lines caused him to basically kill Lyra, and that on
Mm.
top of his I mean, even if he had killed, sorry, even if his wife had died or whatever, he wouldn't then go around and decide that he's going to destroy everything, but also force his friends to watch as he destroys things. That's
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's not something that people who are sad do. That's something
No,
psychopaths
no.
do.
Yeah, that's not depression. Well, yeah, that's insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Oh, I was gonna say something too. It was interesting about no, I've lost it. I'll come back to it. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting chapter um to bring in Haliax as well. And I was like, "Oh, that's fascinating." Um, oh, right, I remember now. So,
Oh yeah.
we're
Forgot about
talking
that part. That's
hmm?
important.
Tried to kill himself first, but because he had been revived, he couldn't die. Oh, right. Yes, he said that he told Celitos that he tried. Um, which I think also affected Lyra. I think she was alive when he tried to kill himself. I was going to say that it was interesting to talk about um, calling true names as well as bringing people back from the dead, because this is like when Lyra did it like 5 or 6 times. Like it only took that many times for some semblance of him to come back, quote unquote. And um, I wondered about that in terms of like the power needed to call someone back from the dead, because in our previous reading he talks a bit about a woman, and we kind of presume that something happened to her, like she died or something. Would Kavoth have tried to bring her back? I don't know. And that's maybe something for the next reading. It was just something that I thought of.
That reminded me. I don't remember if it was this chapter, but we got an origin of the speaking things three times.
Oh, did we? Oh, I
I
might have missed
I
that.
think that might have been in the Telu chapter.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
The yeah they someone said something uh three times. Um,
Oh, I'll have to check
don't
that.
remember what it was,
Hmm. Might have to go back to that. Um,
but it was it was like, oh, okay, so it's based in like
in
not folklore, like religious
religious
text
text. Ah,
or whatever.
I'll have to reread that. Um, Corwin says, "My understanding of Haliax's motive is this quote:
Mm.
I have only the hope of oblivion after everything is gone and the Elu fall nameless from the sky." Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, so Telu asked each person to cross to his side 3 times. I think that's what it was.
Oh, got it. Oh, that's interesting. Hmm. And when we get to discussion, I do want to talk a bit about like religious, uh, like stories, descriptions, like that. It was very interesting to me, um, overall. But yeah, that was the Lanre chapter, which was very interesting. Gave a little bit more, and we'll kind of learn this later, but uh, him mentioning the name Haliax and Kavoth hearing that, it takes him a little bit of time to register that he's heard that name, but it's kind of like a motivating thing moment for him to move forward and do other things in the next few chapters, which was interesting. So then the next chapter that we have is called His Eyes Unveiled. So that's chapter 27. And this is another short chapter, but it follows right after Scarpy's story. Memories tug at the edge of Kavoth's mind after hearing Scarpy's story, and he realizes he's met Haliax and the Chandrian are real, and that they killed his troop over a song. But yeah, this was the hearing Scarpy's story and him reacting to it and realizing like he was just pulling out a lot of memories that he had repressed over the years from just living in Tarbean. Um, it was a good short chapter, but it was a good moment for him to link to return to those memories and link back and they be like, oh yeah, no, that was the name of the man who they mentioned, who was in the group that killed my whole troop. Um, and it kind of motivates him to move forward. But yeah, that was more or less the only thing I had to say about that chapter. Um, I enjoyed the myth building of the Telu story, and I'm intrigued by the fact that Seven chose to deny Telu. Yeah, because that calls back to the Seven Chandrian that exist. The Seven. There's a lot of like consistency with numbers, I feel like, in this book.
Seven's typically a good myth number to have because that gives you a reason for having 7 days
Mmm.
of
Interesting.
in a week.
Yeah.
So if you want your calendar in your story to have 7 days, that's a
Mm-hmm.
good reason why.
Mmm. Interesting. I like that. Hmm.
Also, seven is a very weird number.
Yes, it is.
Yes, one.
Yes. Interesting.
Nobody voted for a secret third thing. Coal fires won the poll
I win the
individually.
poll. Process of elimination. So, chapter 28 is called Telu's Watchful Eye. Kavoth runs to the half-mast tavern, a little bit late as he slept in, to hear Scarpy's story fully. When he arrives, Scarpy tells the tale of Selitos approaching a Lord Aleph, convincing him that Selitos and the Ruach will oppose Haliax. And Telu wants to see justice, and Telu himself bows before Aleph. Aleph grants Telu and the Ruach power, and Scarpy identifies them as, and I quote, those who mete out justice. But his story is interrupted by Telyn priests and a justice, who calls Scarpy a heretic. Scarpy indirectly tells Kavoth to run, by indirectly, I mean he verbalizes this and does not look at Kavoth when he says it, and Kavoth escapes. Scarpy, I made a note here that said that Scarpy seems to know the justice, and he says that he has friends at the church. Um, And in this chapter as well, they talk a bit about Selitos uh, and the Ruach being uh, the part of the Amur, um, which in the next chapter are described as the Church Knights, more or less, for Telu, I assume.
So was that the end?
Yes.
What confused me about this chapter was I couldn't figure out how his story was heretical. It sounded like it was fine. Like it sounded like he was making it seem like the, the god was great. Like there was no
Yes.
negative. I don't know.
So I thought the same. I had to reread a part of the chapter as a result because I thought this is a little strange. The reasoning that I came up with, which may be a bit of a like I don't think it I don't necessarily think that this is the answer, but my feeling was that Selitos is talking to this Lord Aleph person, and he's trying to convince Aleph that, hey, have myself and my Ruach people here. We will defend against Haliax. We will be the one to protect the people, the ones to protect the people. And uh Telu steps forward and says, and basically confirms that he goes, yes, we will mete out justice, we will do that thing, and he bows before Aleph. So in my mind, I wondered
Hmm.
if presenting Telu as someone who is uh
Different.
yeah, like someone who is like there's someone higher than Telu, even though he has all these followers, might be seen as heretical. But I also don't know if like it might be just an example of here's a character who is Telu in another story, and in the story that we heard from Trappist, he's a very benevolent god figure, and that's Trappist's story. And in this story, he's just kind of a guy who's there. Like he's like, I'm gonna help the Ruach. Go me. And he bows.
Yeah, I think probably the bowing.
Mm-hmm.
I missed that him bowing.
I missed it initially. I had to reread it.
But the other part of that is it wasn't just that story. Like they were there because of him. They were seeking him out,
Yes.
and they heard that he was like saying heretical things.
Yes.
So I imagine unless he was saying something insanely pious, they would have caught him anyway.
Yes. Yeah. And then he seemed to know the justice and said he had friends in the church, so he's got some past with the Talon priesthood, I feel like.
I couldn't tell whether he was being
Or if he's just being cheeky.
well was he being um resistant? Was he just like being calm in the face of badness, or does he seemed like he had a way out of it, like
Yeah.
that, like it didn't matter if he was caught because he would just get out anyway.
Yeah, he didn't seem flustered. He just kind of they just kind of came at him and he was like, "Well," and then he, was
Yeah, it
being
felt
held
like
down.
well, this again.
These darn priests. They keep coming after me. Side note, I really like Scarpy.
He's good.
He's pretty good. I hope he comes up more often. I think they also mentioned long names again in this chapter. I wrote down they mentioned them. I didn't write down the context, but I think I was wondering about they're talking about true names, long names. Like it seems that like in this world everyone has a long name, which is kind of like their true that's their name of their
It's their
soul.
scientific name.
There's a
Their
perhaps
Latin name.
yeah. Um, so that was just something interesting, and I think it's going to come up more. And I have a discussion point for later for that, but yeah. Oh yeah, Aleph speaks the long names of the Amur when he banishes them. Ah, that's what it was. Yeah,
Who's
interesting.
Aleph?
Aleph is the lord who Silitos speaks
Hmm.
to be like, we're gonna do the thing. Support us. Interesting. Moving on then, if we want to talk about the next chapter, that's called chapter 20, or that is chapter 29. Yes.
It's called Chapter 29.
It's called chapter 29. Chapter 29. with the name,
Chapter
chapter
29.
29. The Doors of My Mind. So this is another sort of inner monologue chapter, I feel like, for Kavoth. Kavoth digs deeper into his memories and begins to question why the Chandrian killed his parents over the song when many know pieces of the Chandrian story across the world. He recalls Haliax mentioning the Amur, the Sith, and the Singers as enemies to the Chandrian, and how Scarpi's story suggested that the Amur began with Celitos, who has not been seen in 300 years, as he notes. Like specifically the Sith, the Amur, like they have, or they haven't been seen for 300 years. He opens his book from Abinthieve after years of keeping it protected, and he begins to read, or at least he begins to, you know, be prepared for something, which is
The Sith.
The Sith. Only the Sith deal in absolutes. Master Kenobi, that is an absolute. Fuck! I haven't been able to read, and obviously I'm late, but I love y'all. Bye! Thank you, Fireball. I appreciate it.
Also, there's only ever one master and a Sith and one apprentice, but we have thousands of Jedis, and this is balanced.
So balanced. Yeah, that's...
He did bring balance to the Force.
He did. Just a different kind of balance. But yeah, I mean, this felt like a kind of like a transitionary chapter to me. I didn't have too much to say about it. It was good for directing Kavoth to where he wants to go and the kind of questions he's asking. I was like, okay, he wants to learn more about the Amur and the Sith, makes sense. Or the Scythe, I don't really know how you pronounce it, but because there's an E on the end. But I thought it was kind of a good transitionary chapter.
I perceived the way he spoke about it as me being correct when we discussed that.
Yes.
As in, what chapter was it?
Ooh,
No. The one you just did.
Oh, 27. No, sorry, 29. It was 29. The Doors of the Mind. I kind of see this chapter as the end of the Tarbean arc. Yeah, I agree.
I thought he said literally, they killed my parents because they were asking around or searching for the answers.
I think he realized that in chapter
Oh, maybe I hadn't gotten there yet.
it was a different chapter, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's after Lanre turned. I think it's chapter 27.
Oh, okay.
Because that's when he realizes, oh, Haliax, right. Yeah.
Well, he said it like explicitly, which is what I was remembering.
Yes. And I thought about that too. I was like, oh, that's literally what Benji said last time.
What can I say, man? Just very smart.
So chapter 30 is called The Broken Binding. And I quite like this chapter as well. I found this kind of fun. Kavoth attempts to sell his book for some silver talents, and arranges with the shopkeep to write him a receipt, saying that he could buy it back. The shopkeep assumes Kavoth doesn't know how to read or write, and so attempts to swindle him, but Kavoth proves him wrong and impresses the shopkeep, who he also swindles. Which I put in brackets. Kavoth then readies himself to travel to the university. I thought it was a fun chapter. I was like, I hereby consent and sign that I can't read or write. Kavoth's like, you dumb fuck.
I can't. What was I about to say? Oh yeah, I liked the beginning part of that too, when he's basically goes into an inn and he's like, oh no, wait, that's the next chapter. Never mind.
Is that when he's getting clothes?
Yeah, that's the next chapter.
That is a wonderful
My
chapter
bad.
as well. Oh, good, we'll get there. Actually, on that note, if you wanted to go to it, so Chapter 31, The Nature of Nobility. So in this one, Kavoth works scrubbing floors at an inn to earn a bath, and then seeks out a shop to buy some nice clothes from. He puts on a character from a play as a persona, a very haughty, wealthy boy, and persuades or forces the shopkeep at Bentley's to trade some to tailor some clothes for him. He returns to the bar to collect his things and return his towel, and fondly considers the idea of owning a tavern someday. This is a great chapter.
I love that. He basically bluffed his way into royalty or
Yeah.
into
Nobility, I guess. The Exit Tarbean arc is fun. Yes, it's one of the more lighthearted chapters and sequences for sure. Like, considering that Tarbean, for most of it, was rather bleak.
yeah.
Rothfuss was like, we need to throw in some fun stuff. Yeah, I thought the whole thing was good.
This was not the one where he was getting shoes, right? That was the next one.
That's the next one, yeah, which was also endearing and wonderful, and I love it.
So that goes back to what I was saying about everyone's nice.
Yeah, it's maybe based on Kavoth's perspective.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I think we were saying that earlier, right? Or unless I was wrong.
We were.
Yeah. Yeah, because he in this state, he now has a sense of like, all right, my goal is that I want to go to the university, and I have a plan, and I'm gonna do it. And the minute that he's going through that whole sequence is when people are really nice to him overall. And so, yeah, I quite liked it. And it also made me happy when, you know, after he's been kind of torturing this poor shopkeep who's tailoring him clothes, he kind of like gives him throws him a bone at the end and makes him smile, and I'm like, okay, he's done fucking with him. That's nice. So chapter 32 is the one we were talking about with the shoes, and that is called Coppers, Cobblers, and Crowds. Kavoth gets himself a nice pair of shoes, once owned by the son of a shoemaker. He also arranges to travel in a caravan with a husband, wife, a young man, and a young woman. Before he leaves, he visits Trappist one last time, who sees him off, embracing him in a farewell hug. And is very sweet. I wrote here a specific comment that says, in all capitals, Trappist, I'm sorry I doubted you. You were a good man. I was like, oh, I thought you were bad, but you were good. What? Hush, hush.
I like that. I loved how he just he didn't even acknowledge that anything was different.
Yeah.
He just said, "Oh, Kavoth, you go do this."
Yeah. So you go fetch the water. Okay. He's like, actually, I gotta go, and he goes, "Oh, of course you do. Come here." Just hugs him. Yeah.
He reminds me of a certain character from a certain show or some movie or something, but I cannot place it.
Trappist does?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't really think of anyone that I would compare Trappist to. He's a very patient man. Extremely patient. Right. So we were talking about Trappist being a good person, and
now all I can think about is the Zoidberg.
The Zoidberg. Oh. Werder and the shoemaker as well. He was a good person, and I was actually talking about this with Aries. I was like, oh, he got a pair of shoes for free that belonged to his son, and he just said, I don't sell used shoes. And Kavoth's like, okay. And he just kind of walked out with the shoes. And I was like, oh, did his son die? Or is his son just left?
His son was a kid. His son's grown up. This is an old ass guy.
Yeah.
He said my son used to wear these when he was your age. Is what he said.
Yeah, so that to me, I don't know if that means his son is dead
when
or
he was
if he's
your
just
age.
Yeah.
It's like it's just hand-me-downs.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Doesn't mean his son isn't dead, but I don't think it was like a child death.
No. I thought I meant like now he's dead. Like maybe he died when he was, I don't know, 30 or something.
He still wears those shoes in his 30s.
Yeah. He's got tiny feet.
Just very, very small feet.
Very small feet.
You know what they say about small feet? Small shoes.
Small shoes. And this was also an interesting chapter to more so talk about uh Kildan people and the Siaru language, because the caravan husband and wife are Kildan.
Are you
Um,
pronouncing the C differently in the language than you are in the name?
Kildan is written with a C and Siaru is written with an S.
Oh,
Yeah.
and why?
Why? I don't know.
So the one that's written with an S is the language of the people who are written with a C.
I think so, because I think
But
and anytime he says Kieldish, it's like it's their background. But if he says they're speaking Siaru, that's the language. Also, the place Kiel is apparently pronounced the Shald. Oh, he did mention the Shald. So is that the place Kiel? But it's so you pronounce it Shald? That's interesting.
yeah, where's the
Huh.
D?
Where's the H?
Well, it's like CEA
Oh,
makes
Shell.
the
I
shelled.
see.
Oh, okay, it
The
did have a
Shald.
D in it. Okay.
Um, yeah, so it was good for an introductory, or a more of an introduction to like the Sheldon. I guess I'll say Shaolin people, and Siaru, because he also mentions the Aturan language too, because he's like his Aturan was not good, and I was like, oh, okay.
I think that's the language he's speaking.
Yeah, Kvoth. Yeah, I assume.
So it's English.
Yeah,
It's common tongue.
Aturan. Yeah. So then the next chapter, chapter 33, is called The Sea of Stars. And this is the teenage boy chapter.
Mm-hmm.
um
I
Go.
I I love her.
She's great.
She's
I love
like
her.
she's probably gonna come back, right? The
Hope so.
the if I was his age, like she's like ideal woman
Fair.
for me.
She is pretty, yeah, she is pretty neat.
Equally, if you turned her into my age, she would be ideal woman for me.
Fair.
But
Yeah, I'll go into her description and her personality a bit. Um so in this chapter, Kavath is now traveling with the caravan with the people who I spoke about before. And in this caravan, he begins to speak with a young woman named Denna, and starts to realize he has feelings for her. Denna is interested in Kavath, who she sees as a young man so sure of where he's going, quite the opposite of herself. Denna is often described as, if Kavath asks her, "Oh, where are you going on this trip?" and she isn't quite sure. She's like, "We're heading in this direction. We'll get there."
she's a little young to have that sort of attitude.
Yeah, she's what is she?
You expect that like an old person.
14. Yeah, it's a very wise kind of
He's
well
15,
traveled thing
right?
to say. He's 15 at this
And he
point.
said
Yeah.
she was older than him, so she must be like 16.
Oh, fair. Yeah. Um, the Sea of Stars in question, which is what the chapter's named after, is when they spend kind of a special moment by a water, some water that reflects the night sky. So it's like it almost seems as if it's a sea of stars. So Rothfuss gets very poetic in this chapter, and I literally specifically wrote, "Here comes that good Rothfuss poetry." So, yeah, Denna's fun. And this is probably a very big thing for Kavoth, because it's, I think, the first woman that he's shown romantic interest in the story.
Well, yeah, the only other two women in the story are his mom and the prostitute.
Oh yeah, right.
Those are like the
True.
only two other women that have lasted longer than a chapter. There have been exactly three women in this entire book who have lasted for longer than one chapter.
Oh yeah, true. Because I was gonna be like, wait, Lyra. Oh no.
Well, you could count Lyra, but
but Lyra also passed. So
she only existed for that one chapter. She was mentioned outside of that chapter, but
yeah.
she's my age.
She was my age, perhaps a year older. Okay. Fair. Yeah.
I think at the end of this reading, I was actually thinking back. I don't think any of the women at the university were mentioned in more than one chapter either, specifically. So I think there have been
Yeah, not
exactly
often.
3 women at the end of this reading that have been mentioned in more than one chapter, or that have existed for more than one chapter.
Yeah.
That's like, come on, man.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why, like, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit more, but I was hoping that Denna would be in it longer, but then, hopefully she'll come back, and I'll get into that more.
In
Um,
fairness, there's not that
hmm.
really that many characters at all.
Also fair, yeah.
But
Hmm. Which bear is best? Yes. Who did that poll?
I don't know, man.
What was the third option? A secret third option. There's always a secret third option. I had to get real close to read that. I was like, get on my glasses.
I didn't have anything good to talk about in the poll, so I mean,
Okay.
I couldn't very well say if your age suddenly changed, would you date this young lady? Seems it's a bit weird.
Poll, is Denna hot? On a scale of 1 to hot, how is Denna?
Stares at you. Be very careful.
Oh god. Chapter 34. I'm trying to remember which one this was. Oh yes, this was a really interesting chapter.
This was the one where we had the inevitable we've introduced any sort of romance, so now we're going to introduce another person who will complicate it, because that's the only possible way you can have relationships and stories.
But he doesn't even focus that much on it. Like, at first I was like, oh, this is where we're going, but it becomes a different, like, the chapter has a different focus as it goes.
I mean, he trounces him, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's
like
true.
It doesn't the kind of slight swap at the end is probably the what am I trying to say? Most of that chapter is him being jealous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't even think him actually like totally wrecking the other guy even changed that. It wasn't until I think it was the next chapter, maybe, where she met him when he left, that I was like, okay, so she, I don't know.
Yeah, so to kind of give a summary, so chapter 34 is called Yet to Learn, and in this chapter, the caravan takes on a new passenger. I call them Josson or Yosson. It's Josn.
Josson.
Yosson. Who Kavoth becomes jealous of as he rides next to and teasingly, quote-unquote, flirts with Denna. One night, Yosson brings out his... I don't remember if he ever said his name. Age.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Because I was trying to figure out whether I'd had to use the FBI keyboard man meme on him.
FBI, open up.
Boom, 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 boom.
One night, Yosson brings out his lute, and Kavoth asks to see it. Kavoth begins to play and gets lost in the music, and everyone in the caravan is shocked when he finishes playing.
Everyone does the thing where they're like, they standing there, and then one of them drops as a glass and it shatters.
Yeah. Pin drop. Kavoth leaves and walks to the wagons. And that was part 1 of our second reading. In part 2, we'll be covering chapters 35 to 41, and we'll be getting into some discussion. See you then!